All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on ExtremeHealthRadio.com. I hope you're having a good day out there, whatever you're doing. And again, thank you for joining us for this show. I think you're going to learn a lot. I've got a great guest with us here today. So today's date is, for reference, is September 13th, 2012. And this is episode number 8. So you can find it at ExtremeHealthRadio.com/8. And just so you know, all of our shows are transcribed. We have some family members transcribing our shows for us. And so what that means is that anything the guest says during a show or anything that I say is searchable. So you'll be able to do searches on our website for any number of subjects or products, and it'll all come up when you do a search. So, and also it's great too, because if you're driving along and the guest mentions a website or a book, it'll be in the show notes. So no need to write it down. Just visit ExtremeHealthRadio.com/8. And if you have any questions for the guest or me, just send them to Justin at ExtremeHealthRadio.com. Or you can call our voicemail line, leave a voicemail, and we will play your voicemail on the air. It's 949-391-7363. And just to let you know, this show is brought to you by the Excalibur Dehydrator. This is the dehydrator that my wife and I use all the time. We make our raw beef jerkies in it and our macaroons and all that good stuff. So if you're ever going to buy one of these, purchase it through us and we'll make a little commission. You can find it at ExtremeHealthRadio.com/Excalibur. And before we introduce our guest today, I wanted to just talk a little bit about our upcoming show schedule. Try to do shows on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And please visit our show schedule page. We've got lots of great guests coming up. Next week, we've got Lucas Rockwood, who's going to be talking about the benefits of yoga and sweating and detoxification. We've got Don and Carol Croft, who talk a lot about the energy medicine and things like the zappers and frequency technologies. We've got Sean Croxton coming up next week as well. He is the owner of undergroundwellness.com. We've got Dr. Bruce Shelton, who is a homeopathic and naturopathic doctor in Arizona, curing the incurables with all kinds of crazy things like chelation therapies and ozone therapies and all that good stuff. And we've got Barry Carter, Dr. Gerald Smith. We've got lots of great guests coming up. So visit our show schedule page to find out more about that. And I'm excited about today's guest. Let me read a quick bio. Her name is Susan Schenck, and she is a licensed acupuncturist with a master's in traditional Oriental medicine from Pacific College of Oriental Medicine. She also has a master's degree in applied linguistics and a bachelor's in education from Indiana University. She's taught all levels of education from preschool to university. And her world travels inspired her to find the ideal diet that could feed the planet. Having tried dozens of diets herself and always in search of peak health, her search was over when she discovered a simple secret of not cooking. She's the author of The Live Food Factor and Beyond Broccoli, and she currently promotes the raw food diet through lectures, workshops, and coaching. So thanks for joining us today, Susan.
Yes. Oh, hi, Justin. How you doing?
Hi, doing excellent. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Great. So you are based out of Ecuador.
Yes, I live in Cuenca, Ecuador, paradise, heaven on earth right now.
Wow, that's awesome. It sounds like a lot of the... Are you familiar with Dr. Bob Dowling? He's based out of Ecuador as well.
No.
Yeah,
there's a lot of great doctors here, though.
Oh, gosh. He's a really great doctor doing some great work with cancer and root canals. He's a dentist, I think. And I know Mike Adams, the natural news guy, used to live down there. It's kind of a haven for natural...
Yeah, and Matt Monarch and Angela Stokes are here. Greg Canton, who spent 3 years in prison for curing cancer.
Yeah, that's a horrible thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So why is Ecuador such a good place for people that are doing this kind of work?
Well, traditionally there's 3 C's. Cost of living, it's 20% the cost of living I had in California. Mm-hmm. Cost of living, climate, which is ideal, very perfect. Mm-hmm. You get the 4 seasons in one day. And culture, a lot of here in Cuenca, we got a lot of, classical and jazz bands and just, art museums and everything, American restaurants, every kind of ethnic restaurant you can think of almost. And I added the 4C community. There's 4,000 Americans here, up from 400 Americans 4 years ago.
Wow, that's interesting. So,
yeah.
So it sounds like somewhere that you're planning on staying for a long time.
Oh, yeah. This is paradise. Why would I ever leave it and have to go back and be a slave in the U.S.?
Oh, I know. It's amazing. It's such a different life there, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if you're a baby boomer, there is no way you're going to be able to retire in the U.S. unless you've got $1 million per person. And here I can retire with the same lifestyle I had in San Diego.
Wow.
With a very small pension, like $1,300 a month.
Wow, that is so cool. That's such a... I got to make it down there. I've been to Costa Rica and Brazil, but I've never made it over to Ecuador.
This is the best place. I've been to both those other places. Brazil's too expensive. So is Costa Rica. And here it's clean, friendly, and very cheap, and great climate.
So how does the Ecuadorian people adapt to your teachings, and how are they responding to your teachings down there?
Well, I haven't really branched out enough. I'm fluent in Spanish, and that's a project I'm going to work on when I get back from my first visit to the USA in 2 years. And I'm heartbroken to find out that my favorite bookstore has shut down. It was a huge Borders bookstore. But yeah, I am going to work on that. The few Ecuadorians that I've worked with, though, are very, very receptive.
Oh, wow. Wow. So what is their traditional diet down there? Is it much different than in the States?
It's a lot healthier. It's more of a whole foods diet with totally free-range grass-fed beef. Very somewhere between the factory farm chicken and the free-range chicken. But there are free-range chickens here. So we're thinking omega-3 instead of omega-6, which is much, much healthier in terms of heart disease and weight loss and overall health. So I can eat guilt-free meat here, virtually guilt-free. Turkey is very expensive because they don't really factory farm turkey. Other than that, everything is pretty much traditionally raised and slaughtered and everything. It's much more the meat is traditionally fed. It's natural diet.
You know what I liked about your bio? It says in here that you're always in search of peak health, and I know that you caught a lot of flack for some of your dietary changes that you've made.
Yes,
and I'm kind of on the same path you are, and it's interesting that when you have an open mind towards diet and you're just always in search of being healthy and not having ego involved in any of this, it's very freeing and open to be able to just change your diet as you see fit, right? I mean, it's such a great thing because there's a lot of dogma these days, right?
Oh, you know what? The key word you said was ego. What happens is people they go on to this rampage. They've just discovered the vegan diet or whatever. And yes, a vegan diet, the first 3 months to 1 year is going to give you really great health because it makes a great cleanse. And then suddenly you realize you're getting all these deficiencies, but you're making all this money from your books and your website that's all vegan, and you don't want to publicly change your mind, right? Right. Well, I didn't do any of that. I never had, a lot of money invested except for my book. As soon as I switched over to non-vegan, I dropped my sales in my books 30 to 50% any given month. And yeah, it was a big hit for me because I was making $3,000 a month on my book, The Live Food Factor, which promoted a raw vegan diet. And as soon as I changed my mind about the vegan part, not the raw part, I totally believe raw is law. Be as high raw as you can. But as soon as I changed my mind about the vegan part, wow, my book sales dropped dramatically. But I had to speak the truth. I had to really be a truth warrioress, which I am at heart. And the main reason I came out with this book was to warn people about the children, because I saw these vegan babies who were being, their mothers were vegans and they couldn't breastfeed because they weren't getting the right nutrients. So they were feeding their babies hemp seed milk. How are they going to get the vitamin K2 to grow from hemp seed? Right. Great food for adults, but not for growing babies. Where are they going to get the brain food? Where are they going to get the DHA, the EPA for their growing brains? I had to speak out for the sake of the babies and the children.
Yeah, I think it's great because what you've done is kind of blaze a trail for a lot of, the raw vegans. And a lot of raw vegans now are coming out and expanding their diets. And I just think it's a good thing. I don't think that you necessarily have to throw the baby out with the bathwater because you don't want to support factory farming, but it's not really about, you can solve that problem with grass-fed, ethically raised beef, right?
Yeah, and like I say in Beyond Broccoli, I say, okay, you're going to spend twice as much for meat, but you only need half as much. Right. You buy less. You pay more, but it comes out the same, because the average American eats 9 ounces of meat every day, but it's been proven you only need about half that. Wow. You've got protein from your eggs, and I don't recommend dairy. Very few people can handle it, but you've got protein from, eggs and a little bit of seeds like quinoa, which is actually a seed. People think it's a grain, but it's a grain-like seed. And you've got your superior, protein sources, chia seeds, which are the only seed which is about 50% protein. So you really don't need that much meat, and it does help sustain the planet if Americans would just eat meat once a day instead of 2 or 3 times a day.
Right. Yeah, I think there's just an excess of people eating too much meat, and especially the factory farm stuff that's really causing havoc, isn't it?
And another factor, meat always gets this bad rap. Well, guess what? If you heat any food above 300 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to get toxic byproducts. And this is what I really discuss in both the Live Food Factor and in Beyond Broccoli, that you get all these toxic carcinogenic byproducts. Now, meat, if you barbecue it or grill it, got news for you, you may as well go out and smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. That's how many toxic byproducts are created, heterocyclic amines, and there's tons of studies to prove this.
I was going to ask you, on my list of questions to ask you was, can you give a little breakdown on the healthiest ways to cook meat? Because some people do a marinade where they just like a ceviche, and then some other like boiling. What are from healthiest to least healthy? What's the healthiest ways to cook meat?
Okay, first of all, all societies have a tradition of eating raw meat. In Latin America, you've got ceviche. Then you've also got sushi from Asia. Then you've got steak tartare from Europe. Okay, so we all have these traditions of eating raw meat. When I was writing Beyond Broccoli, I was in a car with a bunch of friends and I told them, hey, I'm writing this book that advocates eating raw meat, and they were all utterly disgusted. And then I reminded them, I said, excuse me, do you realize that half an hour ago, you guys all paid $2 each for 1 slice of seared tuna? Now, seared meat is when it's heated on both sides so that the inside is raw, but the outside is cooked. That's one way that is popularly eaten in America. Okay. And ceviche is marinated in lemon or lime juice for at least 4 to 8 hours so that the parasites are killed. And then you've got sushi. Everybody knows what sushi is, traditional Japanese meat, fish that's raw. So every tradition has this raw meat. Now, according to a USA agricultural website, to eat raw meat safely and be totally safe from parasites, you got to freeze it for 2 weeks.
Okay.
Freeze it at the lowest temperature possible. And then if you really want to be safe, marinate it for 8 hours before or after freezing it in lemon or lime juice, some kind of heavy-duty citrus juice. Now, I want to warn you, freezing it will not destroy the bacteria. If you've got E. coli in that food, even after you freeze it, the E. coli is still going to be there. It's just hibernating in the freezer, right? So freezing it and marinating it is a way to be really safe. The ultimate way to be safe is to be on a 100% raw diet for a couple of years, get really, really cleaned out. I actually personally know people who have been 100% raw and eating raw meat for years, and they can eat any kind of meat, and the parasite will just go right through them. And studies have proven this. The parasite has nothing to feed on. There's no debris. They are so cleaned out. There's no toxins in their intestines or anything for the parasites to feed on, so the parasite just goes right through them.
Wow. You know what's interesting about that is a while back, my wife and I were collecting our spring water in Lake Hemet, and we ran into a guy who told us about, I'm sure you probably know of him, Agenus vonderplanets.
Exactly. And, it was the main teacher of the raw animal food diet.
It was interesting because he was telling us that I told him that I was doing raw eggs, and I think I had gotten a bad egg or something one time, and so I took a few months off of it, and that was the time that we ran into him. And this guy was telling me that he can now eat rotten eggs. He eats that high meat where they ferment the meat.
Yes.
And it's just unbelievable what you can get your body used to, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, I've eaten thousands, literally thousands of raw eggs. Out of those probably 5,000 raw eggs, there was only one time I got mildly sick. And what happened was I went to a farmer's market and I got food, some eggs from an unknown source. And I got most of them didn't make me sick at all, but there was 1 or 2 bad eggs in there in the dozen that I got that made me really bloated with cramps. Well, I called in sick that day to work, thinking, oh my God, I got salmonella poisoning, got to call in sick. And I knew I wasn't going to die. I knew I just had to ride it out. And then I called in sick, and then I thought, wait a minute. I got some charcoal pills there, activated charcoal. I'll just take a few of those pills. I took a handful of them, maybe 5 or 6. 10 minutes later, all the bloating, all the cramps were gone. And I thought, wow, I feel great. I got the day off now.
Charcoal is a miracle, isn't it?
Yeah, it can get rid of any food poisoning. You've always got to have it on hand, though. I mean, I've heard horror stories of people who've gotten food poisoning from shrimp, shellfish. Fish is probably one of the more dangerous types of thing, and I would never eat shrimp or any shellfish raw. That's how dangerous the bacteria can be. But I've heard people who got infected and they just took charcoal and they felt great.
Yeah, I've done the same thing with charcoal as well as some clay tablets that I took, and that stuff it just works a miracle.
Yeah.
Isn't most of the am I right by saying the most of the bacteria or problems with the meat is on the outside?
Yes, exactly. Because of factory farming. Now, here in Ecuador, we don't have this E. coli outbreaks. But in the United States, the factory farming is so unsanitary that, yes, you do have to watch out for the E. coli unless you get non-factory farmed meat. If you go to Whole Foods and pay top price for the organic meat, you're less likely to get the E. coli. Now, here's the issue. If you buy some steak at a healthy, source like, Whole Foods or whatever, grass-fed, free-range beef, then you can sear it and you'll get rid of any E. coli that might be there. You sear it on the top and the bottom so it's raw in the middle. But if you get a hamburger, it's all ground up. So you're kind of playing Russian roulette, because if there is any E. coli, it could be anywhere, outside, middle, or underside.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, that makes sense. We got to take a quick break right here, but when we come back, I want to ask you a couple questions about the paleo diet, and I want to ask you also about the ancestral diet, and a lot of people are talking about those kinds of things. So let me just run...
It's basically the same thing.
Yeah, let me just run this quick break, and we'll be right back, and we'll talk to Susan Schenck.
Hi, this is Kate. Thanks so much for listening to the show. I want to tell you about a product I love called Yeast Infection No More. You can find it at extremehealthradio.com/yeast. If you're like me and you've ever had a yeast problem, candida overgrowth, you've had many of the following symptoms like digestive disorders, gas, bloating, skin rashes, allergies, migraines, always being tired, PMS, this is a great system that will teach you how to permanently cure your yeast infection, rebalance your body, boost your immune system, regaining back your life, basically. Successfully used by thousands of men and women worldwide. It's best-selling. It's instantly downloadable. 250 pages of jam-packed advice and instruction. It's backed by over 35,000 hours of intense research. It also is accompanied by a free private mail counseling for over 3 months if you buy the product. What is there not to love about it? Again, find it at extremehealthradio.com/yeast.
Okay, today we've got Susan Schenck with us, who is the author of The Live Food Factor and Beyond Broccoli, and you can find access to her website on this show page, extremehealthradio.com/8. And I wanted to ask you, Susan, about I've kind of had these questions about the ancestral diet for quite some time, and maybe you can help shed some light on this.
Yes, certainly. For 2.6 million years, man and his predecessors have been eating meat. Okay, a lot of people say, oh my God, a lot of vegetarians will say, we haven't adapted to meat. No, sorry, it's the opposite. Okay. We haven't adapted to a vegetarian diet, and especially a vegan diet, which omits eggs and dairy and even gelatin capsules. So it's the opposite. I dispel all these myths in Beyond Broccoli, and I'm the person to do it because I was a strict vegan for like 6 years, and then a strict raw vegetarian for another 2 years. So for 8 years, I didn't eat any meat. So we really were meat eaters, but meat was scarce. I mean, it wasn't like we ate meat every single day, We would eat it a few times whenever we killed an animal or whatever, but it wasn't like the typical American diet where you eat 9 ounces per day, 2 to 3 meals a day. So we would often go without meat for weeks at a time or whatever. And that's what's really great is to go on, don't eat meat every single day is what I'm trying to say. And especially the meat that's heavy in purines like shellfish and eggs, which is not a meat, of course, but eating those things, if you overeat them, you can get gouty arthritis, which is one of the arguments in favor of the vegetarian diet, that our ancestors sometimes got this gouty arthritis from overeating those meats that were rich in foods that are rich in purines. Okay. Now, another thing about the paleo diet is that it was very, very high in greens. Now, greens are very alkalizing. Protein tends to be very acidic, just about every protein. So to balance that, you're supposed to eat like 20% of your calories acidic and the other 80% alkaline. So our ancestors, just like our primate cousins, ate a lot of greens. And the way we can do that today is by eating a lot of green smoothies. You have to get a heavy-duty blender like a Vitamix or a Blendtec, formerly K-Tech machine. And you blend the greens with either fruit, or if you're really sensitive to fruit or too much sweets, what you do is you take a packet of stevia, blend the greens with some lemon or lime juice, from 1 lemon or lime, a packet of stevia, and some ginger, and that will cut out the bitterness from the greens. And the greens can be, spinach, collard greens, lettuce, Kale, dinosaur kale is excellent. Any kind of greens that you can find in your grocery store, which nowadays is limited to about 20 different varieties, but our ancestors ate 1,000 different varieties of greens. So you want to make sure greens are a big part of your diet, even though they're very low in calories. So they're not going to make up a big, part of your caloric percentage of the pie. Okay. But you want to really balance out that meat with a lot of greens.
Okay.
And our ancestors were easy on the fruit. They didn't eat a lot of nuts and seeds either. Now, the problem with most nuts and seeds is that they're high on the omega-6 factor. And we want to have, our ancestors had 1 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. The average American now has about 20 to 40 omega-6s fats to 1 omega-3, which is a recipe for obesity and heart disease and a lot of other really detriments to our health. So the only seeds that are really high on the omega-3 are chia, hemp, and flax seeds.
Okay. So you want
those are 3 good ones. The other ones are really, if you look up on the internet, sunflower seeds, you're going to see that it's so skewed towards omega-6. It's ridiculous. It's something like 40,000 to 1 in some of these seeds.
Oh, wow.
So sunflower, sesame, those should all be used in moderation. Walnuts are the nuts that are heavier on the omega-3. So those should be your nuts of choice. But even then, seeds and nuts should just be, a handful per day. And that's the biggest mistake that the raw food vegans make.
Right.
They think that they're going to get ample protein from nuts and seeds. Guess what? They are really, really wrong. And I know, because as soon as I got off that diet, I lost 30 pounds. I mean, it was a recipe for obesity. If you look up how many calories are in nuts and seeds, it's ridiculous. A cup has about 1,000.
Wow.
1,000 calories. That's 2/3 of my daily calories.
Right. Right. That's
you could eat a cup of those in just 10 minutes.
So I wanted to ask you about, I wrote down some things about the paleo diet that I see that could be missing. And, a guy like Agenus, he really promotes, raw dairy and raw goat dairy and all this kind of stuff. But then...
can't handle that.
But
they absolutely can't.
With the paleo diet, I see that there's not a lot of emphasis on wild foods, or not a lot of emphasis on herbs, if I may be mistaken, or things like green juices or superfoods and these kind of exotic foods that we have access to today that our ancestors probably would have eaten, but they just didn't have access to them, right?
Let me interject here. Our paleo ancestors had a range of thousands of different varieties that we don't have anymore. Mm-hmm. So they had that big advantage. They also had much more mineralized soil than what we have today.
Right.
So to compensate for that, we can get superfoods. Now, superfoods come from all over the world. You've got maca, a lot of them from South America. Maca, cacao, cat's claw, different things like that from the jungle. And you've got, goji berries that grow almost anywhere, and a lot of acai berry and all these things. But the point is, our ancestors did not eat a high glycemic diet. Berries are very low glycemic. Berries are good. Mm-hmm. So anytime you can eat berries, that's a good thing, as long as they're organic. You don't want to eat conventional strawberries, which are heavily sprayed. Mm-hmm. Only organic blueberries, strawberries, and so forth. Our ancestors ate a very high in greens, low glycemic fruits and meat diet. They did not eat 2 things they absolutely did not eat, and I discussed this at length in the live food factor. Mm-hmm. They did not eat grains or dairy. Grains and dairy have been introduced only with agriculture, which began 10 to 20,000 years ago, depending on the geographical part of the earth. Mm-hmm. Very few people can adapt to dairy. Now, Agenus happens to be one because of his ancestry from Northern Europe. Mm-hmm. I know I personally have friends that with a lot of Swedish and Norwegian blood, they can handle dairy. And if you're going to eat dairy, try to eat it raw, which I understand now is almost impossible even in California because the mafia has gone after them, the food mafia or whatever. Right. And also try to eat goat's dairy because it's much more similar to human dairy, human milk. But the issue is that most people lack the enzymes to be able to digest dairy after they're about 3 years old. Okay. And we can't, if I eat dairy, I don't care if it's raw goat's cheese or raw goat's milk, I get constipation. I get mild sinus plugged up or whatever, you know? Right. I mean, I can't even eat yogurt without getting these symptoms. And yogurt is probably the most healthful pick of the bunch of all the dairy products. Right. And grains are the worst. Wheat, let me tell you, wheat has been so hybrid lately in the last 100 years that the body doesn't even recognize it as food. And some people are in mental institutions because of eating wheat. My husband's grandfather was one of these statistics. He was diagnosed as schizophrenic. He was in a mental institution, and when he somehow figured out, I don't know the whole story, but somehow he figured out that if he didn't eat wheat, he didn't have all these hallucinogenic, psychotic outbreaks. So he got out of that and went on to lead a normal, functional life. Nowadays, that wouldn't happen because they would just drug you up and keep you on drugs. Wow. But wheat causes constipation, brain fog. Let me tell you, all my life, I was eating wheat because that was the American way. Pasta, bread, donuts, cookies, crackers, wheat's in everything. All the processed food is hidden in everything, even ketchup. And I constantly had brain fog. People would say to me, Earth to Susan, Earth to Susan. It's a miracle that I got through acupuncture school. Wow. It's a miracle. And it was with great effort. And as soon as I got off wheat 10 years ago, it was like I was born again. It was like waking up from a nightmare. My mind was clear. I was focused. I was present with everybody I was talking to. It was like a whole new life.
Yeah, that's the same kind of experience I've had. I've been off wheat since 2003. And I mean, I couldn't, there's no way I could go back on eating that stuff.
Yeah. And have you noticed that even if you cheat a little bit, I mean, here in Ecuador, the wheat is supposedly less hybrid and much better. But even if I go to a potluck and I can't resist, I got to have a bite of this pasta or a bite of this, whole wheat integral bread, I pay for it the next morning. The more I eat, the more constipated I am. Yeah,
it's just it's such a, and it's funny because you can't really get to that level of knowledge until you experience it and go for a while without it, and then you realize what it does to you.
And realize, oh my God, I've been eating this stuff all my life. What if I had never eaten it? Think how great my health would be if I'd never eaten it. And disease begins in the colon, they say. The large intestine. So think how much our colon is plugged up by all this wheat and dairy.
Right. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you too a little bit about. I think it was in the Beyond Broccoli book where you talked about the Westbrook family and the studies they've done with veganism over long periods of time. Is that? Am I correct in referencing that study from that book, from your book?
Yes. I mentioned that in Beyond Broccoli. And how this family had all these deficiencies, B12. The same with me. After being a vegan, I had all these B12 deficiencies, and to the point where I was even getting nervous twitches. I mean, really bad. And I put myself on. I consulted with Dr. Bass, who's now 94 years old, natural hygienist, who's experimented with every kind of diet imaginable. And he has concluded the same as me, high raw, high paleo diet is superior. And he told me, well, you got to at least eat eggs. So I tried eating eggs for 2 years. My B12 still didn't go up. And then I even had B12 shots and my B12 didn't go up. And so I finally it was like after not eating meat for 8 years, I thought, oh my God, I got to eat meat. And when you've gone 8 years without eating meat, you feel like you're a cannibal or a vampire when you go back to eating it. And I went back to eating it, and as soon as I did, my B12 went through the roof. And I also found, like the Westbrook family stated, that when I ate red meat, that's when I got tons of energy, and that's because of the carnitine in it.
Right.
Carnitine feeds the mitochondria, which gives you energy. Now, red meat has gotten a lot of bad rap from the press. The key is you only need it a few times a week. But when I started eating red meat, I also noticed that my sleep was so much better, and that was because of the amino acid taurine in it that really helps calm the mind and helps you sleep.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's also got vitamin K2, doesn't it? Or is that in eggs?
I think I'm not sure, but I think it is in animal meats and a little bit it maybe in eggs. The only plant food that I found that had K2 was this bizarre food that we've never heard of in the U.S., natto, which is like some Japanese fermented plant food that smells so horrifically that anybody who eats it in a restaurant in Japan has to be sitting in a separate room, a separate dining room.
Right.
And that's the only, and you know what? K1 can convert to K2, but not efficiently. It doesn't happen efficiently. And K1 is important, for certain things like blood clotting. I used to have chronic bloody noses every day because when I was growing up as a kid, we didn't eat greens. And then as soon as I discovered that greens were low calorie and, really good for my weight loss thing when I was a teenager, mysteriously, the bloody noses went away. Well, now I know it was the K1 in those greens. But K2, which is really important for the bones. And K1 does not efficiently convert in the vast majority of people into K2. So that's where we got to get our animal products. Okay,
and so some of the foods that are high in K2 that are animal products would be?
The goose, if I can remember from my book Beyond Broccoli, I go into detail about that. But the goose fat is really one of the highest ones.
Okay, and do you know, I've heard some people, talk about, I think it was Dr. Brian Clement out of the Hippocrates. I remember him saying one time that blending your greens, because what I do is I'll blend all my greens in just water and then I'll add fruit to it or an avocado or something. But he was saying that I think blending the greens actually destroys some of the nutrients and things like that. Have you heard of that or do you know much about that?
Anytime that you chop, blend, cut, or anything like that, you do destroy some of the nutrients. If you want to get the most potent nutrient value from your food, the best thing to do is pick it fresh from the tree or the ground and cut it up with your teeth. But anytime you get something that's not freshly picked, some of the nutrients are destroyed. Anytime that you cut, blend, chop, some of the nutrients are destroyed. If you do cut, blend, chop, you got to eat it right away for the maximum nutrient content. Right.
I think a lot of people, get on to, just a certain diet, like a paleo diet or a raw food diet, but there's all kinds of other things to consider, like the freshness of foods, if a food's been hybridized, if it's wild.
There's a thing like picking a mango right from the mango tree. Anybody will tell you that it tastes much better than getting it from Whole Foods.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you too, what are your thoughts about, I had a thought going back to the ancestral diet. Let's say we were designed to eat meat, but we ate, let's say our ancestors for 10,000 years ate plants. Isn't the ancestral, the people that are talking about like the paleo stuff, isn't a greater question? Wouldn't it be, what are we designed to eat? Because if we've been eating, let's say we've been eating meat for the last 10,000 years, if we're not designed for it, sure, we could have adapted to it, but isn't the greater question, what are we designed to eat?
Oh, okay. It's more like what have we evolved eating? There was no design as such. It's more like what have we evolved eating? And all of my research, and I have an entire chapter about this, which has been reviewed by nutritional anthropologist experts, and we evolved eating meat 2.6 million years. There's no question about it. We evolved eating meat. And vegetarians will say, oh no, we just got by eating meat for 2 million years. Excuse me, you got by eating meat? Don't you think that if that was a faulty food for us, we would have died out by 2.6 million years?
Right.
It's more like, okay, I have a whole chapter on, the spiritual question of eating meat. I answer everybody's objectives. Why? Because I had those objectives myself as a vegetarian. Spiritual, moral, ecological, all of these questions, I've answered them in Beyond Broccoli. And, the issue is that we truly evolved eating meat. Now, maybe, perhaps it's not the most ecological thing for us to do right now. And that's why India developed the whole spiritual paradigm of, it's better to not eat meat, because they had to develop that to convince the masses not to kill their cows, not to slaughter their cows, because there was a huge overpopulation issue. So what I'm saying now in Beyond Broccoli is that it's impossible for most of us, unless you're really, really filthy rich, to go back to the hunter, diet, because we just simply don't have enough land for all of us to eat wild meat. But we just do the best we can. And we just try to do the best we can, and we really can get by with a lot less meat than what we think.
Interesting. Yeah. When we come back, we got to run a quick ad here. But when we come back, I want to ask you about a book that I haven't read it myself, but I'm sure you probably know about it. It's called Catching Fire: How Cooking Made Us Human.
Yeah, I critiqued that book in Beyond Broccoli.
Oh, good. I want to ask you about that, and I also want to talk to you about pregnancy and a lot of people doing a raw vegan pregnancy, and a lot of people having issues with that. So we'll talk to you about that in 1 second while we run this ad. Hey there, I'll be really quick. I just wanted to talk a little bit about a product that I really believe in and really think is a high quality product. I have it myself. It's called Cure Tooth Decay by Ramil Nagel, and you can check that out at extremehealthradio.com/decay. And I don't know if you have heard or know, but tooth decay, cavities, gingivitis, and all these problems that we're having in our culture today, especially with the young ones, is not normal. It's completely not normal, and it's all based on diet. And it is possible to reverse and remineralize your teeth and reverse cavities. So if your dentist is scaring you into getting a root canal, I would definitely recommend reading this book first, because lots of cancers and lots of other diseases can be tied to each tooth. And a lot of people like Dr. Bob Dowling have been making that connection between the health of your teeth and diseases like cancer. He even says that all cancers are caused by problems with your mouth and cavities and tooth decays, and I think most specifically root canals. So I would highly recommend getting this book. It's called Cure Tooth Decay, and you can check it out at extremehealthradio.com/decay. And I think you'll really be surprised and blown away by all the natural ways that you can reverse cavities. So if you buy it and like it, let me know. Send me an email, and I'd love to hear from you. Also, feel free to check out our store where we've got tons of great products that I think you'll really like. All kinds of high quality products like the dehydrator, certain kinds of cleanses, herbal products, blenders, all kinds of really, really great products. So check out our store. I think you'll really be impressed by what we have there and how they can benefit you. So, and also, if you'd like to make a donation, feel free to do that. You can donate as little as $1 if you'd like. Any little bit you can donate would be really appreciative. We'd really love it. So that would help us to continue our work. And also, if you ever make purchases on Amazon, Mountain Rose Herbs, or the Raw Food World, anything like that, feel free to visit our page page first, any one of our web pages, at the very bottom, you'll see links to those sites. And anytime you can, if you purchase from Amazon, for example, on a regular basis or quite often, visit our site first, and we'll get a little commission of anything that you order. So any little bit would be just an amazing way to help keep us running, because we just really want to provide the best and most high quality content, so that you can heal and that you can continue to get healthier and not be reliant on pharmaceutical medications and doctors and things. So every little bit would support us. But if you can't donate and don't want to do any of that, that's okay too. Feel free to just like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, send a link to your friends, sign up to our mailing list, and that would be really, really greatly appreciated. We'd really appreciate that. So any bit of help you can do to help spread the word of natural health, natural healing would be just awesome. So thank you so much for listening. And with that said, let's get back to this interview. All right, we are with Susan Schenck, and her website is, I believe it's livefoodfactor.com. It'll be linked up to this show page. And I wanted to ask you about a book, Susan, that you mentioned in your book Beyond Broccoli, called Catching Fire: How Cooking Made Us Human. And the premise, from what I have understood, is that the cooking process is what helped man, I guess, evolve larger brains.
Oh, hey, listen, Justin, right? I spent 2 pages blasting this guy. And if you look on Amazon, I even wrote a review blasting his whole theory.
Oh, okay.
I mean, do you want me to read some highlights from Beyond Broccoli about how I argue about this? I
would love that, yeah. Okay,
well, he says that, it's been proven, for those of you who want to lose weight, it's been proven that eating raw actually makes you lose weight, even if you eat the same number of calories, cooked or raw. Why is that? Because cooked increases the glycemic index, so your body releases more insulin, and insulin, one of its main messages as a hormone is to store fat, store fat, store fat. Mm-hmm. So if you eat it raw, you're not going to get that insulin release telling your body to store fat. Well, he claims that this is an evolutionary advantage to have all these extra calories, that it helped grow the brain. And I say absolutely not. It's been proven. In my favorite book, I read all these nutritional anthropology books, and my favorite one was Survival of the Fattest. And this author of that book, who's got a PhD and everything, argues that it was the fat that evolved our brain. Yes, it was the DHA, which is a fat that increased our brains. DHA. Now, if you increase the calories by cooking the food, you don't increase the DHA. If anything, you destroy it. Mm-hmm. So that argument is totally wrong. Cooking may have allowed us to gain more calories to overpopulate the planet, but the evolution of the individual is not concerned with the longevity of the individual, mm-hmm. on only the survival of the species. And he also claims that studies that show that cooking produces toxin need not alarm us, because these toxins will affect only animals since humans have adapted to them. And that is ridiculous. I have found hundreds of studies, many of which I cite in the Live Food Factor, which prove that cooking creates toxic byproducts that absolutely are carcinogenic and create disease. If you cook fats too high, you get lipid peroxides. If you cook proteins too high, especially barbecuing or grilling, mm-hmm. you create heterocyclic amines. Mm-hmm. With starches, it's acrylamides. And cooking is so chaotic. The chemicals created by cooking have been proven to be so chaotic that the body will never adapt to them. Even if we evolve another 2 million years, we'll never adapt to cooking because the chemicals are too chaotic and unpredictable. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of arguments that I go into. I also mentioned in Beyond Broccoli, blood tests have proven that those, and I mentioned this in the Live Food Factor as well, those who eat cooked food show in their blood tests intestinal leukocytosis, an aggregation of white blood cells.
Wow.
And this has been shown not to occur with people who eat raw foods.
Now, is this something where I've heard recently that if you eat like 50% of your meal cooked, and if you're able to eat, a salad with it and make half your meal raw, that kind of cuts down the...
It helps reduce that. Yeah.
Okay.
If you eat the raw part, especially if you eat it first.
Okay.
But it's always better. Like Edward Howell, MD, spent his whole life proving that, and he wrote 2 books about it, which I cite at length in The Live Food Factor. But his bottom line is, the more cooked food you eat, the sooner you're going to die. Yeah, that's part of the reason that all these, calorie restriction diets prove to prolong the life is partly because most of the food used in those experiments is cooked.
Right, and he did a lot of work with enzymes, didn't he, Dr. Howell?
Edward Howell. Okay. He spent his whole life studying enzymes. He's like one of the backbones of the raw food diet.
Wow.
And the arguments, and you go to any MD and they're going to say, oh, you don't need to eat raw food. Your pancreas will crank out the digestive enzymes. But Edward Howell proved that your pancreas has a limited ability to do this, that it has a very limited capacity, and when you've hit the end of that, you're going to die. Whereas people who eat raw foods get those food enzymes, so they don't need the pancreas to compensate by cranking out digestive enzymes, and they live longer. A high raw diet definitely keeps you more youthful, more energetic, and younger, and very likely living longer.
Yeah, it just makes a lot of sense that, we probably didn't eat any cooked food for many, many years. And so I wanted to ask you...
Yeah, we didn't. And when you think about it, sure, fire was thought to have been discovered 400,000 years ago. So very likely we did start cooking a little bit of the food, at least around that time. But really, until 100 years ago, we ate at least 50% raw. I remember my grandmother, she was on her dying bed and she craved strawberries. Well, what are the people nowadays on their dying bed craving? Pop-Tarts, Kellogg's cereal. I mean, it's like now the average American eats 95% cooked. A lot of Americans, the only raw food they get is that, iceberg lettuce and tomato and onion on their McDonald's cheeseburger. I mean, it's really pathetic.
It's the only thing that's keeping them alive, right?
Pardon?
It's the only thing that's keeping them alive, right?
Well, they're definitely not being kept in good health because of that. It's like, when you think about it, I mean, it's only been in the last 50 to 75 years that we've had all these cooking gadgets where we microwave, deep fat boil. I mean, even a turkey, the traditional Thanksgiving turkey was, baked, and now you can deep fry it. There's all these cooking gadgets that our grandparents didn't have. So they were kind of forced to eat at least 50% raw,
Right. What do you think about some of the foods that people should be eating for pregnancy and things like that?
Oh, definitely. They need to be eating a certain amount of foods with DHA. In fact, Stephen Cunan, who's the author of that textbook that I love, The Survival of the Fattest, he argues that it was actually, which is the most common sense. I mean, I studied all these different theories of the evolution of the human brain, and this one makes the most sense of all. It was eating the DHA from the shellfish and the fish and the eggs that created our brains to grow. And he says there's just one chance, one critical period to get brain development correct. So human brains need to develop in the womb and very quickly the first year of life postnatally. And if you're a pregnant vegan woman and you're not giving that kid the intellectual advantage, then guess what? His whole life, he'll never reach his potential of intellect. And same thing when you have a kid whose brain is growing through his teenage to young adult years. If you've got him on a strict vegan diet, he might be smart, but he's not going to reach the potential.
You just don't know what he could be, right? So
you got that critical period, that one chance to get the brain development to reach its potential. And, of course, pregnant women should not eat fish, but they can eat the small fish, like sardines, small, fatty, oily fish. Sardines, herring, and mackerel.
Okay.
Shrimp. They can eat those and minimize their mercury and their toxins. They can eat that and get the great, grass-fed beef too. Omega-3 eggs that are really from a very, very good, healthy source. You can eat that and get your brain food. You got to get those minerals and the DHA in there to feed your baby's brain.
And so what are some of the foods that you like, including in your diet, whether they be superfoods, herbs, or animal foods? What are your favorite foods that you like?
Well, I don't like the taste of sardines and mackerel, but I'm working on some recipes to make it better, because studies have shown, and I cite these studies in Beyond Broccoli, that the happiest people in the world are the ones that eat fish. And they're probably the smartest people, too. Look at Japan. My God. They're the smartest people probably on the planet. I mean, they're probably the only country that has a surplus instead of debt problem. Right. And it's all the fish they eat, all the seafood. But you want to try to get it, low in mercury. So it's got to be the small ones, not the big ones like the tuna, swordfish, shark. Those are out. We can't eat those anymore.
Okay.
So I try to eat those, and then I like the superfoods of, the goji berries, cacao, coconut butter. Coconut butter has been proven to reverse Alzheimer's. It's also great. I cite studies in the Live Food Factor. It's great for weight loss, keeping your weight down. Great for antibacterial, great for the skin if you want to use it, externally. And then there's acai berry, which is also good for getting rid of belly fat. Eggs, I believe, are a great superfood, as long as they're from chickens that are free range, truly free range enabled, not the free range label used in the U.S. where they get 5 minutes to roam around and that's it.
Right.
We want the ones that are fed, not grains, because that's omega-6. We want the omega-3, fed natural diet, flaxseed, insects, worms, that kind of thing. So those are definitely a superfood. Grass-fed beef, which is very commonplace in Ecuador, but a real luxury in the U.S.
Right. Now, are those very expensive, the grass-fed beefs, like they are here? Are they?
Oh, no, it's very cheap here. It's probably half what you pay in the U.S. I mean, they don't even have the factory-farmed beef here. You can see the cattle for yourself. They're out in the park, They're tied up, but they're out there eating grass all day, You know
what we got to do is get the farmers to water their grass with ocean minerals.
Yeah, that would definitely be great. Ocean minerals will mineralize things. When I was in California, one of the superfoods that I highly recommend is wheatgrass juice, and grow it yourself. It's too expensive to pay $1 or $2 a shot at a juice bar. Just grow it yourself, get a juicer, juice it yourself, and water it with ocean water if you happen to live near the ocean, so you can get all the minerals.
Yeah, I believe that grass is the only plant that picks up all 92 minerals. Is that correct?
I really don't know, but I do know that the ocean has all the minerals. So if you can water anything with the ocean water, that's where you're going to get the best results.
Wow, that's amazing. So now, wrapping up, what are some of the things that you're going to be working on, and are you doing any lectures in the United States ever, or what kinds of things are you going to be doing in the future?
Right now I'm traveling to the US, but it's more for shopping and visiting friends and family. Everything, but I do lectures and classes here in Ecuador, here in Cuenca, and I'm just kind of going more inward spiritually than I am doing research on nutrition right now.
Oh, great. And are you planning on writing any more books or just promoting the books that you got? And
I'm planning to write a spiritual book in which I've interviewed, you know how everybody says it's almost impossible to get enlightened, it's so hard, blah, blah, blah. Well, one day I woke up and I realized I have 4 friends that are enlightened, so I'm interviewing them for my next book.
Oh, great. Okay, so your Susan's website, for those that haven't got it written down, is livefoodfactor.com, so you can always visit her website and find out what she's up to, and you can pick her books up, The Live Food Factor and Beyond Broccoli, on Amazon. They'll also be linked up on our show page here, so if you buy through us, we'll get a little commission. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
So, that's about it. Thank you so much, Susan, for joining us today. I really appreciate your time and energy here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Justin.
Okay, would you mind staying on after I close out the show?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it. If you found any value from this show and if you learned a lot from it, please click the like button and follow us on Facebook and visit our store as well. We've got lots of great products in there too. And if you'd like to donate, please feel free to donate. You can donate as little as $1 or anything you'd like. So that's how we thrive, and that's how we keep the